The Mesa Chamber of Commerce Inside Business podcast brings you a unique view of Mesa through its vibrant business community and the subjects that are important. The podcast is produced in the Mesa Chamber of Commerce Media Studio, sponsored by the University of Phoenix. Please enjoy this episode of the Mesa Chamber Inside Business podcast.
Hello, everybody. This is Jeff Bear from Copa Health, and today we have Erin Callinan with us, who is going to expand our thinking on mental health advocacy and awareness. Erin, I've known for many years, watched her grow in this field to a level of respect that few have. So I'm going to introduce her now in our continuing series on mental health advocacy for the month of May. And Erin, let's start off by telling the audience a little bit about yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeff. I so appreciate the opportunity to be here. As you mentioned, I have worked in the behavioral health field. It's been almost 20 years now, and I actually started off in this lane by mistake after a fairly tragic experience of being diagnosed with bipolar disorder when I was 17. And so my family and I at that time, we knew nothing about mental illness, let alone somebody who lived with a mental illness. And so ultimately, navigating what it was like to access the behavioral health system from that side, to face the fear and the stigma and the shame and really the maze that my family and I experienced when we were trying to find help, it gave me really powerful insight that once I found myself and found my footing and, kind of put my shoulders back and held my head high, I went on to work in the behavioral health system, starting off my career in domestic and sexual violence advocacy, and then shifting over to mental health awareness and, sharing my experience, because I'm not alone in this. I've met so many people along the way that have similar lived experience, and I wanted to be a part of this powerful movement.
One of the topics I'd love for you to cover a little bit today, part of your experience is with legislative advocacy. It's such a tough thing in today's political world. And we would think that a subject like this would be something we can all agree on. But talk a little bit about what your experience has been in that part of the mental health field.
Absolutely. Being a part of legislative advocacy, I think, brings power and a voice to the Capitol that so many people living with mental health challenges don't recognize they have access to, they have the right to. And in my experience, so many legislators want to hear from people with lived experience. And so I was fortunate in my advocacy work to partner alongside and be a part of organizations like Mental Health America of Arizona and Copa Health and so many others who really created safe ways to partner with legislators, to really share the voices of what are the barriers that people in the community are facing? Why is funding important? And really kind of pulling and tugging on the hearts of legislators and grabbing their ear to say, hey, we have needs in the community. Here's what they are, and we're going to fight for it. And so being a part of that type of work with so many great community partners here in Maricopa County really gave me this sense of power to thrive and help me understand that leadership wants and needs to hear our voices. And that's how you shift systems. That's how you change the world, right?
I'd be interested in understanding a little bit of how you would strategize this because of the term limits, that not just the term limits, but the terms that the elected officials serve. So how do you, if you have a project you're taking to them and it's, 6 or 8 months before they're going to start a campaign, how do you get them to want to be part of what you're trying to sell? How do you do that?
Sure. Great question. Collaborate with other people, families, and organizations who are already doing that work. We don't have to recreate the wheel or feel as though we're in it on our own. Much of my inspiration came from Sue Gilbertson at My Kid. And I've been fortunate to sit on their board for many, many years. And, it took a mom with a son living with a serious mental illness to knock on those doors and say, I need you to listen and I need action to be taken. And so I would suggest sort of that similar path for anybody, but partner with advocacy groups that exist already, who've already formed some of those strong connections and relationships with legislators. Because as you said, with, term limits, that can make things challenging where, you've got things on the Senate or the House floor that look a certain way one year, and then there's a shift in leadership and you may be back at square one. So I would say collaborate. I would say get really intentional with what it is you want to share and what you want those representatives to do with that information. So you have to come in fighting and asking for change. And so being really clear in that change is important. One organization I would specifically call out, and they're doing great work, is NAMI. And really assisting people and families with lived experience to structure, how do I tell my story? How do I frame it in a way that is my honest truth? It's heartfelt, it's compassionate, and it's raw. And it brings, I think, to the attention of people the huge systemic gaps that exist in behavioral health.
So, Erin, is there any one project that you worked on over the years that gives you the most pride of anything you've been involved with?
Absolutely. 1000% was finding the courage to share my voice with the community, with anybody that I cross paths with. Through, therapy, family support, I was able to kind of feel like the world wasn't ending based on a mental health diagnosis. And so I originally published a book many years ago that I'm relaunching coming up here in May.
I think you should tell us about that.
And so that is absolutely, kind of my passion project and something that I'm incredibly proud of. It's a very raw story, and I don't believe in sugarcoating things. I believe in having real conversations about real life with real people. And so my book is called Beautifully Bipolar: Ditching the Shame with Heart, Humor, and Hustle. And so in that experience, my intent and, the goal for that really is to reduce the amount of stigma that surrounds mental health. That, if we have the courage to show up as our authentic selves, we give ourselves permission to raise our hand for help when we need it, to show that a mental health diagnosis does not define who we are. And so in my book, I talk a lot to not only individuals who are navigating mental health challenges, such as, medication, therapy. What about disclosing to other people in your life? How do you advocate for yourself in relationships, in workplaces? But I also provide strategies and a glimmer of hope to family members. Because when an individual is struggling with their mental health, that impacts the entire family. And so my parents and I went through such a kind of beautifully horrific experience of trying to figure out what the heck do you do with the diagnosis. And so I really want families to have some of the tools that we learned along the way and provide sort of a blueprint that not only includes some laughter and some sense of humor, but a sense of hope and encouragement that there's every reason to keep pushing forward.
Could you give our audience just a 30,000 foot view of what it means to be bipolar?
Yes. There is actually a couple different types of bipolar disorder, but I will speak to bipolar disorder 1, which is my diagnosis. And it's ultimately a chemical imbalance in the brain that makes it challenging to regulate mood. And so I manage my bipolar disorder with medication management, with therapy, with a lot of self-care practices. And I have been really fortunate that through a lot of hard work and, putting in the grind that it often takes to live well with a mental health condition, I have been in recovery for many, many years. However, I know that's because I lean heavily on those coping strategies to keep me well. So folks who are living with bipolar disorder can absolutely manage their conditions when they've got the right supports around them and they're ready to take those next steps forward.
So this is maybe a good spot to talk a little bit about mental health first aid. Can you give us some thoughts on that?
Sure thing. If you are not already familiar with mental health first aid, this is a nationally credentialed public education course. And so it's intended for the general public to best recognize the early signs and symptoms when somebody is struggling with their mental health. It's best used as an early intervention, just like CPR and first aid. And so the mission is, how can we provide education and training to the community so that people within the community have access to supports who know what to do, know what to say, and know where to find the resources from right where they are, at home, in their community, at their workplace. This course is through the National Council for Mental Well-Being. And many years ago, I became a certified instructor of the youth mental health first aid and the adult mental health first aid courses. So this is a course that I offer in person and virtually all throughout the country to folks of all different experiences and backgrounds.
That's very interesting. Of all those places that you've spoken to and all those different crowds, do you have a favorite?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I would say I felt really empowered speaking to individuals who were living with a variety of different types of disabilities and what their experience between the physical overlap of living with, being differently abled in some way and living with a mental illness. I really thrive when I'm around other people who can share their experiences and stories of resilience. And so, yes, while I have loved speaking to, 4,000 plus groups running keynotes on national stages, it's often the experiences and stories of people afterwards who have navigated, unimaginable things, and they've done it with grace and compassion. And it's those events where I feel more connected to the people around me than I typically, may experience in other ways.
I'm going to say 3 words to you, and I want you to tell us what they mean to you. Beneath the brave.
That is the motto that I live by and is also the name of my mental health consulting and training company. For so many years, I put on that brave face. I was afraid to be seen. I was afraid of judgment. I had fear and shame and stigma because of that mental health condition. And so beneath the brave really means giving yourself the courage and the strength to take off the mask, to shed that suit of armor that so many of us wear. Because when we get beneath the brave and we ask for help and we talk about what we're going through, that's where we find hope and healing. It's beneath the brave that the real person lives. And my mission is all about normalizing conversations so that people can take off the mask, get beneath the brave, and live the life they're intended to.
So, being someone who is inspirational to others, and that really is what you do, who is inspirational to you?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would, honest to God, there are 2 people in my life that are the most inspirational folks that I know, and I'm certainly biased, but it's been confirmed by the community for decades. My mom and dad, Mike and Prill, are 2 of the most incredible humans that somehow miraculously over 20 plus years, they have been able to give not only me, but other people living with mental health challenges, give them this sense of love and loyalty and acceptance, so that people who cross paths with Mike and Pearl, they know they've got a family on their side. And they have joined me over the last 2 decades on national stages across the country, sharing their story. And there's nothing more inspiring than having a mom and dad speak their truth with confidence, without that fear or that shame. And they're really proud of me, and I'm really proud of them. I mean, together we made it. We made it this far, and they continue to help people and families every day.
Where do you want to be in 10 years?
Retired on the beach.
That's a great goal. I like that.
Yeah. Honestly, I can't imagine doing anything than what I'm doing. If you would have asked me 20 years ago if I would have even said a peep about living with a mental illness, I would have said, absolutely not. You're out of your mind. And this is where I belong. I've never felt more compelled to be a part of a movement like the mental health movement. And so I hope in 10 years, I'm sitting here with you, Jeff, continuing the conversation.
We'll do this on the beach, okay?
Perfect.
I think I know a good beach to go to, too. Erin, it was a joy being with you today. I want to once again thank the Mesa Chamber of Commerce for the opportunity to have these podcasts and promote mental health advocacy in May. And with that, we'll say good afternoon.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
This has been a Mesa Chamber of Commerce Inside Business podcast. You can find all podcast episodes at iTunes, Spotify, or your own favorite podcast website. You can also find them online at mesachamber.org. Content of this podcast is copyright the Mesa Chamber of Commerce, unless otherwise noted.